Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Monday morning, 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, the 29th of November. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and just waking up, having a coffee here, and the chat room is open. I did pop the link in there that I want to continue talking about here, and that's Myths About Domestic Abuse from Dave Decker and Anger Resources, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES.com. And this topic, this website's very helpful. I think anybody could benefit from this website. He's got information on there about all the issues of anger-related issues, such as like road rage, or how to handle our anger, like if we're stuffing our anger, and how to not be abusive, but we still need to be assertive, but not abusive, because anger is natural and normal. And when you go and you check out this website, you can read up like what is anger. We already covered all that like weeks and weeks ago. Been on this website here for weeks. Probably this would be like week number 5 for sure. But I just find this information very helpful because I had a lot of anger management problems. I'm still dealing with a lot of anger, from my past, and I'm probably not alone in this. I know that I didn't want to be abusive because I was angry about the way that I was treated as a child, and just angry about the destruction of my family growing up in this dysfunctional home. But when I got older, I didn't want to hurt people. I thought, no, I don't want to hurt people for sure. It'd be the last thing that I want to do. So I started stuffing my anger, and then I found myself full of rage and all this anger that had been just pent and stored up, And then it was very much self-destructive because I was wanting to self-injure, and I just couldn't figure out how to release my anger. And so stuffing anger is not good either, but being abusive is not good either, right? So I think most people could benefit from this website. So I hope you will go check it out. That's www.angerresources.com. And so we'll finish. We'll I don't know. Let's take a couple of days probably to finish this one piece of this article up, because there's a lot of good information here, and I could totally relate to it. The myths about domestic abuse, right? So we left off in this one section, so we'll pick up there. And you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a sensitive topic for most people to listen to, unless you are comfortable with it, right? Now, a lot of people are not comfortable listening to topics about abuse and are not comfortable, talking about it or listening to it. So you have to know where you're at and know, what's good for you to listen to, and you have to make that decision for yourself. And if you find the topic and the information is stressful or is bothering you, you have to turn the show off. You know what I mean? Like, everybody needs to be responsible for what they listen to. So you have to listen to all of my shows at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone, an adult, give you permission to listen to my show. And the reason why I say that on every show is because young people under the age of 18, you're still considered a child, and children have the right to protection at all times. And when there's a chat room present, you really need to be aware of how to keep yourself safe. And I just want young people under the age of 18 to start getting in the habit of letting someone know what they're doing online, because there are so many sick people out there who would like to get a hold of children and hurt them, sexually use them, child sexual predators, pedophiles, you name it. There's a lot of sick people out there. If you go to the FBI's website, you get FBI.gov. They have some great information on there about internet safety for parents and for children. And there's lots of great information on there about the whole issues of child sexual predators and about pedophiles and just how many there are out there and how they manipulate children, right? And so anyone under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my show, and also that you would go and get the information and learn, if you haven't already done so, and learn how to protect yourself at all times, whether you're online or whether you're on the street, or whether you're at the mall with your friends or whatever you're doing. You get the information on how to keep yourself safe and how to protect yourself. I was nearly kidnapped 5 times when I was a child, and my parents were abusive and almost killing me, so they didn't care. And so, I was a vulnerable child, obviously growing up in an abusive home, and always on the street if I wasn't at home. The streets seemed to me a little bit safer. And, of course, they're not. And so, you need to learn how to protect yourself, because there are a lot of sick people out there who will do horrible things to children if they can get a hold of you. And that's why I say this on every show. It's so important, because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows. The players could be anywhere. So, make sure that you get the information on how to keep yourself safe, right? Do not become a victim of some sort of sick individual, some sort of child sexual predator or pedophile, right? You keep yourself safe, right? So we'll get right into this topic here, and this is myths about domestic abuse. And we left off on this one section about where Dave Decker was talking about women. And, he in this article, he really is kind of talking mainly about the abuse of women by men, although his whole website's not geared for that, because we all know that women can be abusive too, right? And he does too. It's just that this particular section here, he is kind of talking about the males who batter and women who are, the victims of this abuse, right? But he acknowledges himself, because he's a counselor. He knows all about this. That men can be abused too. That their women and can also be very abusive, right? But this is just some stuff that he's bringing out, specifically talking about where men would be battering their wives or their girlfriends or their partners, right? And so he's drawing attention to the myths about domestic abuse. And we left off on this one section saying, number 17, myth number 17, saying abused women will always seek out and find themselves in abusive relationships, and that's where we left off. And he says that the reality is that the idea that a woman involves herself in a series of abusive relationships did not hold true in Lenore Walker's survey of battered women. Even when a woman does involve herself with another batterer, it's not always easy to tell that he will become abusive when they first begin to date. Men often do not become violent until a commitment is made, for instance, moving in together, becoming engaged, or getting married. So that's what the reality is of that. So that's where we left off. So we'll start with the next one. The myth number 18, women who end up in abusive relationships were always abused when they were children. And that's a myth, right? The reality, although some women in battering relationships experienced or observed violence and abuse in their families of origin, the percentage is significantly lower than for their male partners who are abusing them. So it's not really true that all women who end up in abusive relationships were always abused when they were children. That's not necessarily true. The percentages, that does happen. It happened to my mom. That's what I keep yapping about, right? But the issue is it doesn't happen. Not everyone grew up abused and then ends up being abused by their partner, but it does happen. And I think that's just important to know that it can happen, but it doesn't always happen. You know what I mean? So, for instance, I grew up abused, but my partner and I have a great relationship, and he would never abuse me. So, it's not true for everyone, right? But it can happen. The myth number 19: the police and the legal system can protect an abused woman. That's a myth, right? That is a myth, that the police and the legal system can protect an abused woman. Anybody who's been abused out there, who's been involved in domestic violence and abuse, knows that that's not always the case. Sadly enough, many times they just the police and the courts fail them, and that's what he says right here. The reality, often police and the courts fail to take strong action against a batterer, and even when there is an order of protection or restraining order, it may not be taken seriously or enforced as it needs to be. Many women are assaulted and hurt with order of protection orders in place, right? So that's just the thing. It's a hard situation because many women, they're on the run for their lives, and they are, they have these restraining orders of protection, and they even tell their bosses at work, and their coworkers that they have this restraining order, this order of protection against their partner, and that if he comes around, not, to alert them so that they can call the police and whatnot, because it's just scary, like we see so much of this in the headlines. All you have to do is start reading those headlines that pop out all the time, sadly enough, where women are killed because their partner finds them. This is after they've left their abuser, and then their abuser tracks them down and kills them. And this is sad, but it's very true. It happens all the time, and it should never be happening. I can't understand what is the problem and what is the matter with people. Why anybody would want to hurt somebody, I don't get it. It's like, to me, it's like these, and women are can be abusive too. So I'm not just griping about men here. Like, I don't understand why anybody would want to hurt somebody and kill them. Like, to me, that's just extremely wrong. Why can't we all just live here on this earth and get along? Like, I've never understood this. I grew up in hell and had to make a lot of sense of it. You know what I mean? So I've spent years thinking about this and not understanding why anybody would not get help, and especially if they were hurting the other person, why they wouldn't sit there and say, man, I'm hurting my family, I'm hurting my wife, I'm hurting my girlfriend. Or if it's the woman abusing everybody, then the woman could say, I'm hurting my husband, I'm hurting my children. And, excuse me, why they wouldn't get help so that they don't, it should matter to them. And I think we need stiffer penalties for these psycho people out here who think that it's perfectly okay to hurt people, right? Because they're literally just saying, hey, I don't care. I'm just going to play God with this person's life, and I'm going to just kill them. And, that's these people that go and kill their partners and their husbands and wives and children, right? They're just playing God. They're just like, I'm ultimately going to be, take their life. Because these people are sick, obviously very sick, or they wouldn't be doing that, right? And the police and the legal system really can't help most people, and that's the truth. It's very, very sad. And we can't even save children's lives, so what makes us think we can save an abused woman's life or an abused man's life? We can't even save children's lives. So this is absolutely, we're working on it, we're trying. But the thing is that, it's just absolutely ridiculous that people would do this to we have cases up here in Canada, too, where, people will, women will leave these abusive marriages and they'll get away from their abuser and they'll be working someplace. And we had a case, a few years back where this man went to his ex-wife's work. And she had left him because of abuse and all this, and he killed her outside of work. She came out of work and he shot her down, and he killed her. You know what I mean? Why? What purpose does that serve? You know what I mean? Now he's busted and he's doing time, but what purpose does that serve? When I saw that in the paper, I'm like, why would you do that? Why does this person have to ruin the other person's life completely, by taking their life? Why can they not just walk away and say, hey, well, I guess, I need to go get some help because obviously all my partners leave me, you know what I mean, sort of thing. I'll never understand why people do this to each other. I grew up in a house where people were battering each other. I talk about it all the time on here, but it just makes me sick that people do this to each other and think it's okay. So we have myth number 20, and that says women can change their abusers if they are good enough partner and attentive, caring, and loving enough to their man, right? That's a myth. Women can change their abusers if they are a good enough partner and attentive, caring, and loving enough to their man or to their partner, right? The reality, many women, especially young women, believe this romantic notion that they can somehow transform their partner into a non-abusive person if they only try hard enough, right? Quote unquote. And Dave Decker says, in fact, men are responsible for their abusive and violent behavior, and once violence has occurred in the relationship, there is a strong probability that it will occur again over time, becoming more frequent and more severe. Only men themselves can make the decision and take the steps necessary to intervene in and change their controlling and abusive attitudes and actions. Because we're all responsible for our behavior, so these people out here who batter their partners and batter their children, you can't change them. They have to want to change, right? And so it's very, very sad that people, women quite often think, well, if I'm good enough and I'm loving enough and I'm caring enough and I'm a good enough mother and a good enough housewife, and women quite often think this stuff. If I'm good enough, in every area of our marriage, that I can change this. I can make him stop abusing me, and I can make things better, right? And a lot of times, women, that's some sort of a last ditch, way of thinking, to think that they could possibly change their abuser, by something that they're doing, by their own, by being good enough or being, no, it's not going to happen. And many women think like that, and it's because they've been so battered down. They just feel like it's theirs. They can change them. I know when I was young, I dated a guy who was abused. I was in my 20s, and I dated this guy who, for a couple of years, and he was abused. And, I thought that, and he was an alcoholic, right? And I thought, he never did hurt me, but he always said that he could. He had the potential to, and I told him, he knew about my past, and I told him, well, you wouldn't hurt me, you know what I mean? He says, well, I might, because of, I can't control myself. And sure enough, we had to split up because we would have killed each other for sure. We would have turned into each other's parents, like we would have turned into our parents, just abusive and this horrible marriage, because neither one of us had dealt with our issues, right? But I kind of used to think, well, no, he wouldn't hurt me because he loves me. I was thinking he loves me. Well, it doesn't matter if they love you; they still have the potential to hurt you. Like people, there's parents out there, I'm sure, that say they love their children and they kill them, right? It's like, love really has nothing to do with it. It's a means of controlling people, is what it is. It's a means of controlling their lives, the situation, the relationship, whether it's a marriage or just, dating or whatever. It's a means, the abuser's using that to control the situation. They're not out of control. It's a means to control. So that's the whole issue. Abusers can stop any time. They don't have to abuse their children. They don't have to abuse their partners. There's no excuse for abuse, period, and that's why there needs to be stiffer penalties. People always have these excuses. Well, I was abused as a child, or, well, I was on drugs and I didn't know what I was doing, or I was drunk and I didn't know what I was doing, or these are just excuses, and there's no excuse for abuse, right? And I don't care what kind of silly, lame excuse people have. It's all up to them. It's their responsibility. And the courts, I think the courts need to take this a lot seriously, like more serious, and start really coming down on people. And change it so that people will start to think, hey, if I do this, I'm going to go away for life. And so they better start, and there will be no pardon, there will be no parole, and I would just sit there and rot in jail, and they might think twice about doing it. But see, now people know that, if they kill somebody, they're only going to get a few years, slap on the wrist, a little penalty, and off they go back out to do whatever they want to hurt more people, right? Because they don't have to change their behavior. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I can't believe that this society is so sick and twisted, but I grew up in it, so I know how sick and twisted it really is. That's why I'm speaking out, Like I have some of the family members that are still living, which isn't very many. There's only really like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 direct descendants left from my parents out of 7 children, and that includes the kids. The grandchildren, because nobody had any kids. We were all so screwed in the head and so messed up from the abuse from my parents that none of us wanted to. One of my sisters has 1 daughter, and one of my other sisters had 2 kids, but one of them was killed by a drunk driver, hit by a car. And so that leaves 1 nephew, 1 niece. That leaves one granddaughter, 1 grandson from my parents, right, out of 7 children, and there's only 3 children left, and there's only 1 parent left. Our family is pretty much destroyed by this, and just by different things happening in life. And the thing is that there's some of the grandkids, they didn't live in it. They don't understand why I'm speaking out like this, and why I wrote my book, and A Life of Death or Redemption, and why I would do this, because they love their grandparents, and that's perfectly okay that they love their grandparents, but it doesn't change what their grandparents did. I love my parents too. Does it change what they did? Just because I love them, I can say, "Oh, I love my parents. Oh yeah, okay. I just won't say anything at all." No. I hated what my parents did to us, and I hated what my parents did to each other, and if it was completely wrong, every bit of it, right? So for these other people in the family, which isn't very many of them, you know what I mean, but these few people that would like to voice up and start, coming against me because I'm speaking out against abuse, it's like people, wrap your head around the whole issue that your grandparents were 2 of the most abusive assholes on the planet. Get a grip, man. I mean, they loved you and you loved them, but that does not change the fact that they spent, how many years were they married? They were married when my mom was 20. My mom passed away at 68. They were married for 48 years, and they abused each other the whole entire time. And they never said one kind word to each other after I was born. So, that was 30 years, they never ever said, "I love you, husband, I love you, wife." There was no flowers, there was no presents. They never ever exchanged gifts. They never said a kind word to each other. They cursed each other to hell. They ruined and trashed our family. They beat on each other. people just don't want to admit that, but I know because I saw it and I was there and I was trying to break up a lot of the fights. They were horrible to each other and to their children. Now, they love their grandchildren, and as a matter of fact, never attempted to even discipline their grandchildren because my sister was an abuser too, and their mother was harsh on them, extremely harsh, and she almost killed them when they were babies. My sister almost killed her own 2 sons because she was force-feeding them and wasn't taking care of them. And then even as they were growing up, it was a little iffy because I was over there too, and she was treating me the same way. My sister grew up in the same home I did. She was just another abuser, right? And abused her husband horrifically. And so people, they want to live in this little pretend world, and they want to see things a certain way that are not, it's not reality. My dad is like that. He's schizophrenic. Nothing is reality to him. He's off in his own little crazy world, and it's like, no, people, get a grip, People just don't want to face the facts that abusers are abusers. They do what they do, and they hurt people, right? And so these people, you could never be good enough. You can never do anything right enough to get an abuser to stop abusing you. So if you're in one of these situations and your partner's abusing you, and you're thinking, well, if I was just good enough, caring enough, loving enough to this person, I could stop them from hurting me if I tried hard enough. And it is not true, because like Dave Decker says here, in fact, men are responsible for their abusive, violent behavior, and hey, women are too. So, I'm going to throw in men and women. Men and women are responsible for their own abusive and violent behavior, and once violence has occurred in the relationship, there's a strong probability that it will occur again, because the abuser, that's how they're going to choose to handle it, right? That's how they're going to, whether it's a man or a woman, doesn't matter, they're going to choose to do that. And they are the only ones that can make the decision and take the steps, Dave says, here, Dave Decker says, to intervene and change their own controlling and abusive attitudes and actions, right? You can't change them. I couldn't change my parents and get them to love each other and to treat each other kind. There was nothing we could do to change our parents' behavior. They would have had to do that themselves. And they were court-ordered counseling after they were brought up on abuse charges for beating the crap out of my brother, that, they needed help. And they didn't go get help because they didn't want to get help. They just didn't want to admit they had a problem. And so, I think that mainly was it. My mom didn't want to look like this bad mother because her mother was horrible. Killed her own son, abused a bunch of orphans and 7 children, and her husband. My grandmother was a mean, vicious woman, and her mom. And my dad, his family's just bizarre. Who knows what's the matter with them? But his parents were first cousins, if that tells you anything, right? So there was something seriously wrong with their side of the family. But, it's like these 2 people, they did not want to get help. They trashed our family. And I'm speaking out against it because I could no longer sit on the couch and keep all this within me, knowing how I grew up and how my parents treated all of us, all of my siblings as children, and knowing how they treated each other and not say anything. It was such a farce and such a joke. I was like, what, I'm just going to sit here to protect them because what? To protect them, why? The courts knew they were abusive. They were brought up on bloody charges. You know what I mean? And we should have been removed from the home. Had social workers coming in, making me take off my clothes, checking my diaper for signs of abuse. You bet they were. And, that's the whole issue. The abuse just continued on. So that's the whole, we slipped through the cracks. We just one of these families that just slipped right through the cracks, So it's kind of, people just want to live in denial and think that there's just, that it's perfectly okay to beat and trash your family. And it's not. And I'm going to continue speaking out against this for as long as I live, right? And really, I don't care about my dysfunctional family, to be honest with you. I really don't. I've had enough of playing that life script. Like Dave Decker's got a lot of really good information on here about the shame-rage connection, and also this whole issue of that abusers and abusive families, dysfunctional families, will write these life scripts for us, and we're supposed to play them out. So I was always supposed to play out this role that my parents had set for me, and my siblings even, because the 2 siblings that are living now have no respect for me, period. Although I'm a 45-year-old woman, I have my life pretty much together. My sweetheart's terminally ill. They don't care about that. They don't care that I've been dealing with this situation for 10 years. 10 years. My sweetheart's been terminally ill for 10 years. He's I mean, it's a miracle that he's still here. And, but it has definitely hurt our relationship. You know what I mean? Because he's so ill, that he's just hanging on all the time. And my family's not rallying around to support me. No, because they were my abusers, right? And so why should I care what they think about me speaking up and speaking out about this? I don't care. You know what I mean? I really don't. They were not there for me as children. As a matter of fact, my nephews, who were just 1 year younger than me, were responsible for a lot of my abuse. But I don't talk about it because he's living, and I personally just chose to not discuss what happened between me and my two nephews, right? But their parents were abusive, so they were abusive to me too. And they were a lot bigger. At the age of, 13, 14, these were teenage boys, and they were a lot bigger than me, and they were quite often kicking me around, dragging me down the street by my hair, on my knees, losing all the skin off my knees, smacking me in the head with, multiple times, hurting me, right? And so, people, they think it's a joke, right? They just think it's a joke. I mean, they literally dragged me down the street. They would not let me walk and dragged me down the street by my hair to the corner of the street. And I was outraged. Absolutely I was, because my knees were skinned up and my hair was pulled out. And I tell you what, those little punks, my nephews, who were really my age pretty much, one of them wants to sit there and act like what I'm saying here is not true, even though his own mother was an abusive bitch. My sister was an abusive, crazy woman who beat on her children. I was there. I saw it. And took a big, huge chunk out of my nephew's back with one of her shoes, the heel of her shoes. It's like a pump, like a high heel shoe. She ripped his back up with that thing. Tore about I'd say a 2-inch huge gash in my nephew's back for no reason. She just didn't like his attitude. So this is the thing. Abuse runs rampant in my family. It's rampant. And every single member that's left, which there's only 5 people left in my family, and they are all screwed in the head. They think it's okay to do this to children. They think it's okay that my mom bashed my head in with a rolling pin and hurt me in every way. And they think it's okay that my dad and my mom tried to destroy each other physically in every other way every day that they were married. See, because that's the cycle of abuse. That's that whole dysfunctional garbage. They're still living this life script that was given to them, and they refuse to get out of it. Well, I climbed out, and I tore that old script up, and I wrote myself a new script, and that is I will be treated with respect. I will be treated with dignity. For the first time in my life, at the age of 41, decided that, hey, I deserve to have a good life, and I deserve to be treated with dignity and with love and respect and kindness. And these people here in my family that say that they would love me, but yet would come against me because I'm raising my voice about the abuse I suffered and the abuse that my family went through. You know what I mean? I feel sorry for their children because they're going to be screwed and they're going to keep this cycle going. But that's their own problem. You know what I mean? Because I'm done with it. I'm completely done with the cycle of abuse in my own family. But this just tells you how deep this runs. Many times, people will side with the abusers. They will side with the abusers because they have a relationship with them, whether it's their grandparents, whether it's their siblings, brothers and sisters. Their sibling is abusing their partner, their own partner, and then they think, well, that's just the way it is in our family. That's the way it is, and hey, he loves her, right? Or she loves him, right? Oh yeah, that's why they beat on each other and try to destroy each other on a daily basis, or one or the other is trying to destroy their partner. No, abuse kills people. And so if you're in this situation and you're having a hard time and you're being abused, you make sure that you get yourself some help. Call a crisis line if you have to. Call 911. You call somebody and you get some help, because you do not deserve to be abused, and I don't care what anybody says or has ever said. No one deserves to be abused. And my God, You know, we have to stop this cycle of abuse, and I'm glad I can stand up and raise my voice, and I hope that everybody else will do the same thing, because this is absolutely ridiculous, unacceptable, and it needs to stop, and it needs to change. You know what I mean? So don't allow yourself to be abused, right? It's so horrible. Make sure that you get help in some way. Find someone who can help you. It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, you know what I mean, or if you're a child or you're a young person listening to this. Make sure that you get some help. So, you know, you call a crisis line or you call 911. You call somebody if that you can get a hold of, or go online. You can anonymously, talk to people if you want to, just 'cause, whatever you have to do. But you make sure that you get yourself some help, okay? And we have about a couple minutes or a minute left here. I'll be back on tonight on my show, as well as Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And then tomorrow again, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we'll take another look at this. There's a whole lot left to this article. I hope you will go check this out, www.angerresources.com, Myths About Domestic Abuse by Dave Decker. So take care, everybody. Really keep reaching out, keep holding on there, and don't allow yourself to be abused in any way, ever. You make sure that you get the help that you need. And if you don't get the help right away, you just keep phoning. You keep phoning until you get the help that you need. You don't give up, ever, okay? And we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.